What is going on, guys? It's Nick from Surfcast and the Island back at you with another video. Today's topic of discussion is going to be, in my opinion, my most effective plug this fall. It's going to be pretty much we're at the last day of the year before the new year. Just going to give it a seasonal reflection, what I did with it, what I did do, what I did learn, what I'm going to get better with as time goes on, what I may try with this plug. And that's going to be the Super Strike Lures Needlefish. I'm going to go way much more into depth on it. It's an unbelievable plug. Covers a wide array of different situations and instances. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so before I get into more so of the plug dynamics of the Super Strike Needlefish, I'll go over a brief background historically of how this plug came about over periods of time. Obviously, the plug builders are Donnie Musso, which is the father, which was later taken over by Steve Musso, the son, into current time, producing these magnificent plugs that were originally once made in wood, but quickly after a year or so shifted over into plastic. But neither here nor there. A very profound father figure in the surf casting community by the name of Dennis Zambrotta went over pretty much where the usage of the needlefish began, and that was Block Island. It was more or less the proving ground of catching a big fish on a needlefish. And before the time of the Super Strike, there were other plugs out there of similar nature, that cigar shape that had a tapered front, flared back type of deal. One company was known as Bone. They made a needlefish. The problem was with this needlefish in particular was the fact that if you hooked up with a big fish or multiple fish in that regard, the hardware just simply wasn't adequate enough. It was rather antiquated, and the plug would more or less just fall apart right in front of you. I'm sure I wasn't there, but from what I've heard through this podcast and whatever, many of big fish were lost. But that's when the request, came to Donnie Musso, and he was the one that really took into consideration what surf casters wanted in a needlefish, something that was durable, something that could get knocked around, banged around, hardware that was going to hold up and not worry about straightening out a split ring or pulling a hook out. So over time, this is the creation right here that has stood the test of time for many of years. I'm using yellow as an example, but there was one color in particular I remember in that video Dennis spoke about upon his behalf, that it wasn't your traditional flat green. It was more of a lime green, and it earned the name Block Island Green because it was such an effective plug for catching multiple fish in the 40-50 pound class. And during that time period, many of those guys broke their personal best, and it was apparently a magical time. The golden era, many would say, that was part of that piece of history. But just as a little background, I'm going to get into more of the specifics of how I use it and how I intend to use it in the future. Okay, so in terms of the specifications of this plug, the first thing I will get into is the breakdown of the sizes as well as the weights. More or less, this plug comes in 3 different lengths corresponding to 6 different sizes, When you map that out, that's pretty much 2 different weight classes for each size. So for example, the 3 different lengths that they come in include 5 1/4, 6 3/8, and 7 1/4. Within those, the 5 1/4, it ranges anywhere from 1 to 1.7 ounces. The 6 3/8 ranges from 1.5 ounces to 2 3/8 ounces. Last but not least, the 7 1/4 ranges from 1 3/4 to 3 ounces. So I don't have any 5 1/4 inch with me. I don't even think I have any at all that I have purchased in the past. I more so lean towards a 6 3/8 and 7 1/4. This is more of an inlet and beach oriented plug for me. The 5 1/4 is just, for what I'm intending to do with it, is just too small. But for example, this is the 6 3/8, 1.5 ounces, and 2 3/8. And the way to decipher is the eye. The eye that is yellow indicates the lighter plug, which is a slow sinking. The red eye on the Super Strike indicates that is a loaded fast sinking. Hence the 1.5 ounces, 2 3/8 as indicated. Not going to get into color too much. Some guys get color crazy. I used to be that way. There's a handful of colors that work great. Yellow over white, you'll be all right. Straight white, black over purple. Keep it very simple. Maybe throw a green in there as well. The sand deals are around, of course. But yeah, that's pretty much the simplified version of weights and lengths corresponding to the sizes and so on and so forth in proportion. Yes, like I said, this is an open beach and inlet application for me. And the thing that I really like about these plugs that I will dive into is the versatility factor. There is very few plugs out there that you could throw in a wide range of conditions that will also be uninhibited by wind. And what I mean is, if you have a big onshore wind, other than a diamond jig, there's very few other plugs that could really slice that wind as well. And it's great. You could throw it during the daytime, you could throw it at night. The best way I like to describe a needlefish is pretty much a castable bucktail. And the reason why I say that is because it has many of the similar, if not identical, retrieval patterns of a bucktail, with the exception of a different profile. Obviously, this is plastic. A bucktail is a lead-headed jig wrapped in hair with a pork rind or whatever you use as a trailer. But the principle remains the same. Slow retrieve, make sure you let it sink. Twitch every couple turns of the handle. That's all you pretty much have to do with this plug. There's other things you could do, obviously, like how you sweep a bucktail. You could sweep a needle, you could pause it, so on and so forth. Yeah, that's pretty much it in regards to how I would retrieve this plug, work this plug. Okay, so expanding on the versatility factor of this plug, the reason why I also believe that it shines in many other instances and circumstances is simply because, obviously, picking up this plug, I'll pick up the heavier one for that matter, because I haven't showed you. This is a 3 ounce, but the principle remains the same. Yes, obviously, it looks like a needlefish. That's the name of the plug, but it's also great in imitating sand eels, even squid, bunker, all those types of baits, herring. And the reason being is, even if you look at the anatomy of a bunker, yes, they are pretty pretty wide in terms of vertically when you look at the side of a bunker. But if you were to look at a bunker head on, they're pretty flat. And when a bass or any game fish for that matter is chasing a bait fish of that size, head on, a bunker is still pretty flat looking. So yes, there are certain features to this plug that can still imitate a profile that's bigger. Obviously, there are other companies like Gibbs and have you not that also have larger profile needlefish, or stubby needlefish for that matter, also like how Super Strike carries. But it is just a universal profile that I've come to realize that, hey, if you don't have sand eels around and you have bigger bait around, it doesn't matter. These fish will still hit this profile, even say if there are sand eels around, but the predominant bait is bunker. Yeah, it'll still work. It'll still catch. It's a profile nonetheless, and something in nature that striped bass will be triggered by. But there were many nights, many nights that when this plug came out of my bag, it didn't go back in the bag. It was the only plug I needed, and it produced for the whole tide for hours. Obviously, I would have to make adjustments, which I'll get into in terms of length and weight. But obviously, you're fishing deeper water, heavier sweep. You're going to want to go with the red eye needle, that being the 3 ounce, that being the 2 3/8. Even though it's shorter in length, it's still heavier than the 7 1/4 ounce and 3/4. But say you're fishing a slower moving ripper, you're losing water for that matter, maybe you would want to throw that 7 1/4 ounce and 3/4, or that 6 3/8 ounce and a half. I'll even take it a step further. If you're fishing shallower water with a slower moving rip, but the fish are further out and not right in front of you, yes, you will be able to reach it with a 6 3/8, 2 3/8 ounce. But the problem with that is it's sinking too fast, may not look natural to the fish. Might be able to reach out with the 7 1/4 ounce and 3/4 ounce. Sinks a little slower, but you're getting the casting distance, as opposed to still getting the casting distance with the red eye. But it's sinking too fast and you're dredging bottom. Some guys like when you're pretty much dragging bottom through the sand or wherever you are. Again, it will produce, but there are certain instances, say you're fishing a boulder field, you can't really do that and you'll get hung up every time. But also, my version of working this plug is somewhere in between riding too low and dragging bottom and riding too high and you're out of the strike zone. So I would like to imagine if my needlefish is somewhere remote to the bottom, I'd say I'd like to see my plug in my head probably 1 foot to 1.5 feet off riding off the bottom. Yes, you could produce above and below that, but I feel like in my head, when I picture a plug, any plug for that matter, that's where I like to see it riding. These are structure-oriented fish, remember. Striped bass are also called rockfish. They like anything that's other than flat they would prefer. So to get it deeper and down into that strike zone, heavier sweep, offset it with weight. Lighter sweep, offset it with less weight. It's rather simple. In terms of castability, also weight, but if you need something to still cast, just go, like I said, 7 1/4, 3 1/4 ounce, ounce and 3/4 ounce, excuse me, because you still get the length and castability, but you also get the slower sinking rate if you're fishing shallower rips. That's pretty much going to cover me for this video. But in terms of the size class fish, I mean, we've caught anything to schoolies up to 20, 25 pounds. Me personally, I've seen bigger, but that was pretty much the substance of what I caught. I mean, my friend, shout out to Sean, he caught his personal best. He pulled a 37 right next to me in a lineup. Massive, massive fish. Beautiful fish for that matter. But it goes to show you that this plug is well beyond capable of catching anything from schoolies to big breeders. On that note, I would just like to thank all you guys for tuning in again. This is Nick from Surfcasting the Island. If you like this video, please like, comment, hit that subscribe button, and I'll be sure to get more content to you coming soon. So stay tuned.